Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rupal Parekh. I am a coordinator, community engagement coordinator, one of the two community engagement coordinators for TAB. I'm also an assistant professor at the School of Social Work. I'm going to let my colleague Katie go ahead and introduce herself.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, my name's Katie Malgioglio. I got my bachelor's in social work and my master's in social work degrees from the University of Connecticut. I've been working with UConn Tab for about 2 years and just started my role as community liaison and one of the community engagement coordinators with Rupal.
We would like to welcome you today to today's webinar on identifying and addressing displacement in EPA MAC grants. Thank you for joining us. Our goal today is to provide some education on displacement and help everyone here feel more comfortable writing about and talking about displacement, specifically in the context of brownfield grants and brownfield's redevelopment process. In today's webinar, we're doing a brief overview of MAC grants, defining displacement and summarizing the issue, giving examples of what it looks like and how it impacts communities, and how this all relates to brownfield's redevelopment process. We will also be going over the grant writing guidelines. More specifically, we'll look at section 2A. Apologies. We'll be looking at section 2A of the narrative, which discusses environmental justice and minimizing displacement. We will also provide some pointers on writing the section and go into some specifics about anti-displacement strategies that you can write about on the grants and implement in your own communities. We'll have some discussion questions, but if not, depending on time, we will also provide an example of writing about displacement on the MAC grants. And then, of course, if we have time, we'll leave some time for Q&A. So we'll be going over the different grant types. First, the community-wide assessment grants are for communities beginning to address their brownfield challenges and funding and can be used to access multiple sites within a municipality. Start a brownfields inventory, develop site-specific cleanup plans, or conduct community engagement efforts related to local brownfield sites. The maximum project period is 4 years. As you can see, the award funding is up to $500,000 per applicant, and the number of awards anticipated is 60. Assessment coalition grants include several different partners. They must be led by state, county government, or regional planning commission. Coalitions can include 2 to 4 communities or nonprofit organizations that don't have the capacity to handle a brownfields grant themselves. As you can see, the maximum project period is 5 years, and it's up to $1.5 million per applicant, and the number of awards anticipated are 26. Cleanup grants are for communities with confirmed brownfield sites, and people applying for the grant must be the owner of the site. Applicants can request up to $500,000, request $500,000, $2 million, or $5 million to clean up one or multiple sites, but the awards of $500,000 are a lot more common and accessible. And as you can see, the total number of anticipated awards is 65, 40 for 500,000, 17 awards for 2 million, and 8 awards for 5 million. Multi-purpose grants are a bit more harder to come by. They can use the funds for assessment and cleanup activities in a specific target area over a period of 5 years. EPA requires that the funds are used for phase 2 site assessment, a brownfield site cleanup, and the development of reuse plan if you don't already have one. And as you can see, it's up to 1 million per applicant, and the number of awards anticipated are 20. So we'll be talking about displacement in the context of neighborhoods and communities. And the first thing to know is that there are actually three different kinds of displacement. There's direct displacement, indirect displacement, and cultural displacement. That's what we'll be talking about today. So sometimes households are forced to move because they are evicted, facing environmental hazards in their neighborhood, or because of redevelopment projects where homes or apartment buildings are torn down to make way for new and more expensive development. We call this direct displacement. People who lived in these homes and neighborhoods are forced to relocate. Indirect displacement refers to or occurs when households can no longer afford to stay in their homes because of increasing rents, when rents get too high for families, especially people of color and low-income households. They may feel like they have no other choice but to move to more affordable neighborhoods. As a result, people lose access to their social networks, jobs, schools, places of worship, and other amenities that are important to them. Direct and indirect displacement both lead to cultural displacement, which refers to broad, impactful neighborhood changes as people and businesses are priced out. In most cases, it is low-income populations, people of color, Black and Brown owned businesses being forced to leave, while higher income white residents move into these neighborhoods, and the businesses shift and change to meet their customer base. Displacement also affects older people, and we see a lot of young college-educated professionals moving into these gentrified neighborhoods. Okay, gentrification versus displacement. People often get the terms gentrification and displacement confused, or they use them interchangeably. So we briefly wanted to clarify what exactly these words refer to. As we discussed in the last slide, displacement is the forced relocation of existing residents and businesses from their neighborhood and communities. Gentrification is the process of neighborhoods changing when places of low real estate values are redeveloped or revitalized into places of high real estate value. This usually attracts new businesses and new residents. Usually they are in the form of higher income backgrounds. Gentrification often leads to displacement, but it does not have to. And that is why the EPA has put more of an emphasis on minimizing displacement this year in their grants. There is a big sentiment in these gentrified communities of, now that the neighborhood is nice, why can't I live here? The goal is not to stop gentrification or prevent our brownfields redevelopment projects from happening, but to be aware of the impacts that they can have, create an anti-displacement plan, and prioritize the needs of existing community members and small local businesses. Okay, so
Do you want to do this, Rupal, or move past
sure.
it?
So has anybody here seen experience have you seen gentrification or displacement in your communities? And if you could talk about your experiences? It's okay. Maybe we can, discuss this a little later and talk about it a little later, because I know that in many communities in New England, people are experiencing gentrification and therefore displacement. I see Joyce, your camera's on. Yes.
Oh, I think you might be muted, Joyce.
Thanks. Yeah. Sorry about the video. I have the laptop below what I'm looking at, so it looks like it's up on the ceiling. Sorry about that. Maybe I could fix that. Yeah. So no, I don't have anything to really add to the discussion on this at the moment. The sites that we're considering to put in our application have not been redeveloped yet. But I could see that might happen in the future. Whoops, I lost you.
Nope, you're here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I didn't want to, I wanted to acknowledge the discussion and listen, but I don't have anything to add at this point.
Well, thank you. Hopefully this webinar can help you think through some of the issues that may arise in your community.
Yes, I hope so.
Thank you. This right here is a basic overview of displacement and some of the key points of the issue. So we already know that displacement is the forced relocation of communities' existing residents and businesses. We haven't yet gone into who is impacted, and these include our typical sensitive populations, as we mentioned, people of color, low-income populations, groups with low educational attainment, and adults over the age of 65 and families, especially single-parent families with young children, are the most vulnerable to displacement. Looking at where displacement occurs, it most commonly occurs in urban areas and major cities. In Connecticut, we know that we've seen displacement in Hartford and in Bridgeport and in New Haven, in Rhode Island. Providence is very gentrified and seeing residents being displaced in Boston. Residents being displaced. Boston, Massachusetts is one of the most gentrified cities in the country. Displacement is everywhere, and in New England is by no means immune. There have also been records of displacement in Portland, Maine, in Burlington, Vermont. This is not a comprehensive list by any means, just a few examples to put displacement in New England into perspective. The term displacement was coined in the 1960s, and it's been on rise ever since, with lots of different examples throughout history, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Displacement frequently occurs as a result of gentrification, revitalization initiatives in communities, or redevelopment projects, but it does not have to happen. And we will later talk about strategies to mitigate displacement, which is why this is really important conversation to have for brownfields redevelopment. So why does displacement occur? Some of the drivers include rising costs of living and housing, lack of affordable housing options, redlining and other discriminatory policies in the history of this country, and neighborhood revitalization. So here's just some history that's going back to the 1960s, and it's just a few examples that I think are noteworthy. Starting with Seattle, Washington in the 1960s, a Black entrepreneur brought land into the central district of the city, and other Black Americans followed to make this part of Seattle their home. Back in the 1960s, the central district had 90% Black population, but throughout the years, this district kept getting gentrified and Black people were being pushed out of their neighborhoods. Today, the central district of Seattle is only 9% Black. That's an 81% decrease, and it's also the destruction of culture, neighborhoods, social network, economic stability, and a place that a lot of people once thought as their home. In Portland, Oregon, between 2000 and 2010, over 10,000 Black people were displaced from their neighborhoods within the city. So this is recently. And demographically, Portland has become one of the whitest cities in the country. Around 80% of their population is white. In New York City, Flushing, a neighborhood in Queens, was home to around 70% of New York's entire Asian population and a large majority of people of color. Displacement has been on the rise there for years, but in 2020, 3 developers came together and built luxury apartments and businesses in the neighborhood. Many residents have been displaced as a result, and those who are still managing to afford to live there in the neighborhoods have said that there are no chance they'll be able to stay there long term. Los Angeles, California, as you can imagine, is a huge example of gentrified city, leading to displaced residents. In the early 2000s, a lot of low-income neighborhoods were modernized or revitalized, which attracted young, higher income renters to move in and force the existing residents out. These residents have to move to neighborhoods that are even lower income, and the results in really dense, concentrated poverty, which we'll talk more about on the next slides. Finally, in Atlanta, Georgia, 80,000 people in the city are currently at risk of displacement and facing housing insecurity. It is very evident that displacement is not an isolated incident, something that just recently started happening, or a trend specific to brownfields redevelopment. It's a systematic issue that's impacted millions of people that need to be addressed in a lot of different spaces, including your MAC grants, which we'll talk about in the next few slides. These are some statistics and facts that might help us understand displacement and really put it into perspective. Displacement disproportionately impacts Black and brown communities, which is abundantly clear when we read that nationally 73% of Black renters and 63% of Hispanic renters live in neighborhoods with a high risk of displacement. As you all may know, we serve all of New England here at UConn tab. This includes Boston, which is the third most intensely gentrified city in the United States. Going into some of the impacts of displacement on communities, we see intensified, more concentrated poverty conditions as people are displaced into even lower income neighborhoods. This is very limiting for economic mobility and opportunity, and limits access to important resources and amenities like schools, healthcare facilities, employment, places of worship, and other services. Displacement is stressful and traumatizing event, and there's evidence that there are many negative impacts on physical health and mental health, as well as healthcare access. Displacement populations experience higher rates of depression and anxiety, cancer, cardiovascular disease, infant mortality, birth defects, and more. Displacement is incredibly harmful to communities. And all of this data goes to show why EPA is focusing on protecting communities and keeping people in their neighborhoods this year on their grants, and hopefully for a long time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rupal. And before I start, I do live across the street from a doggy daycare, so if you hear some barking, I apologize for that. But yeah, so we're going to talk about displacement and brownfields redevelopment and why it's important specifically in the context of brownfields redevelopment. So we know that brownfields redevelopment can present opportunity and serve as a vehicle for transformation for communities, but we also know that the process can present a lot of different challenges. There's a lot of complex regulations, limited capacity within local government, and most importantly, the direct connection here. Revitalized brownfields can increase taxes, increase rent prices, and increase cost of living within communities, and this always leads to the possibility of displacement. In this year's round of grants, like we've mentioned, there's a big emphasis on environmental justice and underserved populations. It is those underserved populations that are at risk of displacement from their homes and their neighborhoods. So we really want to think about brownfields redevelopment as an opportunity to promote equity, advance environmental justice, and protect the culture, residents, and small businesses of communities through anti-displacement initiatives. Getting into the grants, so the guidelines have changed a bit from this year to last year. I believe displacement was previously in section 1BII, but now you'll see it in section 2A, or more specifically, section 2AII3B, but that's a little bit of a mouthful. But we're looking at the environmental justice portion here at the bottom. If you'll look at the points, you'll notice that the environmental justice portion is weighted very heavily. And in general, there's a lot of emphasis on EJ and underserved populations this year. So for this section, first you're going to identify environmental justice issues in your community, and then you'll move into 3B here at the bottom, which is about advancing environmental justice. And it says, discuss how this grant will advance environmental justice and minimize displacement of residents and or businesses in underserved communities in the target area. So for some more context on this, we'll talk about displacement and environmental justice and how they're connected. So first, let's just go through the EPA definition of environmental justice. Which reads, environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation of and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. This goal will be achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards and equal access to the decision-making process to have a healthy environment in which to live, learn, and work. So I want to emphasize this last point, equal access to the decision-making processes to have a healthy environment. Equitable, fair, inclusive, participatory decision-making in communities will lead to policies and initiatives that protect current residents and businesses from being displaced. There are lots of examples of successful anti-displacement initiatives and communities fighting for their rights and winning that we're happy to share with you, and we'll share some strategies on the following slides. But when people are welcomed into spaces where decisions are being made and are called into that process, it results in better outcomes for communities, for public health, for our environment, and for the environmental justice movement as a whole. Environmental justice is about the fair treatment of all people and preventing displacement and creating communities that are safe for people to stay in as these redevelopment projects are happening is how we can treat existing residents of our communities with fairness, dignity, and compassion. So here are some different ways that you can discuss displacement on the MAC grants this year. So firstly, you want to identify any displacement that may possibly occur, especially in underserved populations. After this, you might want to think about property values, rent prices, vacancy rates, demographics within your community, any measurable factors that you can utilize to keep track of displacement. The reason that our collective understanding of displacement is quite limited is because it's difficult to measure. It happens slowly over time in a lot of cases, and largely people have not been measuring it. We're just now doing research within the EPA on displacement. So it's really important to get different strategies to measure and evaluate displacement, to keep track of it, and to monitor this trend within your community. And then perhaps most importantly, you want to develop an anti-displacement plan that is tailored to your specific municipality and makes the most sense for your community. And on the next slide, we're going to have some anti-displacement strategies that you can start thinking about in terms of your own town or city. Lastly, throughout this section of the grant, you want to be mindful of the connection between displacement and environmental justice. So, really prioritizing sensitive underserved populations and emphasizing the importance of protecting the rights of your current residents and small businesses is what's really important here. So moving into some of our anti-displacement strategies, you can find more information about this on the EPA website or through TAB. We have a resource that I'll share with you shortly. So these are some strategies that have been identified as effective specifically for minimizing displacement in the context of brownfields redevelopment. So we have community benefits agreements, community land trusts, inclusionary zoning, small business preservation programs, and tax abatement. Starting at the beginning, community benefits agreements are contracts between community members, private developers, and usually the local government as well. So community benefits agreements, or CBAs, outline the needs of the community, the benefits and outcomes from the redevelopment project that the community really wants to see, and goes through how funding will be used in plain language so that everybody has access and understanding to that information. These agreements are formed and implemented by the partnership between the stakeholders I just mentioned, so community members, private developers, and local governments or any other stakeholders. But anyone in the community can express interest in this or start organizing to make a community benefits agreement happen. Community land trusts refer to a nonprofit organization purchasing housing or plots of land to sell to their community's residents at an affordable price. So it's about creating long-term, sustainable, affordable housing for your community members. And community land trusts are best for communities that have a nonprofit organization with the financial and organizational capacity to take on a project like this. Inclusionary zoning. This is a local policy that requires a certain amount of affordable housing units to be present within a community. Usually a certain number of units within a housing development will be set aside for people and families under the average income. And this is something that needs to be implemented by your local government, specifically a land use or zoning board or your local housing department. Moving on to small business preservation programs, like the name says, these are programs that support small businesses and owners of small businesses in a wide variety of different activities. These can be implemented by the local government or economic development department in your town or city, and they're best for municipalities where there's a strong network of small businesses that have a solid foundation already established within the community that can be built upon. Lastly, tax abatement programs lower taxes for developers and homebuyers with a heavy focus on homebuyers who identify as working class or low income. Tax abatement requires a lot of planning, a lot of communication, and a lot of knowledge on your community. Not to say that these other strategies don't require any of these, they certainly do. But if your community doesn't have a really strong economic development or community development department, it might be challenging to get something like tax abatement implemented. Programs like this need to be frequently revisited and changed as your local economy changes. If you have the capacity for it, it's very effective, and there's examples of tax abatement being used for energy efficiency and climate resiliency initiatives, so it's definitely something to consider. We'll do one more discussion question. I'm wondering if anybody has experience with any of these strategies, or if any of them seem like maybe a good fit for your community or for your anti-displacement plan. And I'll go back to the slide so we have it up.
I think I'm the only one here.
Thank you so much for participating, Joyce.
So I'm on a steep learning curve here with the Planning Commission. We're applying for a community-wide assessment grant. So the two that I can think of that are maybe applicable is the inclusionary zoning. We have a state statute that requires that all towns allow for there's a term for it, infill housing. And that's done at the zoning level, I'm told. I had a discussion with a staff member yesterday about this. And we have a lot of focus on housing and keeping it affordable in our communities. And then some of our towns have economic development committees that I could see would be able to institute the small business preservation, but I'm not sure on which ones are participating in that, but my group would know. So I'm sort of seeing how we can work this into our application. It sounds, yeah, especially the inclusionary zoning one. That's a recent state change that all towns must abide by because there's such a shortage of housing.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Just the fact that you're considering this and considering how it can be how these strategies can be implemented and work for your community, I think puts you ahead of the game in comparison to a lot of communities because this is such a new topic and people don't know how to talk about it or discuss it. Um, so, the fact that you're sort of visualizing what might be able to work and, writing about that on the grant is awesome.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
thanks.
I'd also think about, some of the barriers that you may experience. We know that affordable housing sometimes, even just the term, or some people that, may not be as comfortable with that, and just some of the barriers that you may experience in your community and how you might address that. May be something important through community engagement and, engaging different neighborhood sectors so that the process is inclusive. Um, may be important to mention as well.
Um, I'm glad that you mentioned that. One of the things we're trying to work in our application, but I'm not quite sure how this population would participate, is the increasing homeless population in our communities.
Mhm.
And also it's we're trying to tie that into one of our target area and specific sites as
Mhm.
well. But it's just hard to get any metrics on that except through the Human Services Agency and a little
Mhm.
bit through the city. Um, so, but I think it really ties in because the stats that we're using as far as whether even a census tract is disadvantaged or not, I think could have been affected if that was factored in by the ACS
Mm,
survey.
mm.
So we're kind of trying to wrap our arms around that one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And really making sure that that affordable housing, if you're tying it in with the homeless population, then it really is accessible to those people.
Yeah, it's a very difficult topic on so many levels to
Mhm.
address. So I don't know if anybody else has asked that question with you guys, or you've seen that on grant applications that you've been, draft reviews or anything like that.
Um, Katie, I don't know if you have any insight. I have some thoughts, but go ahead if you have.
Um, this isn't a conversation that we've been having, and I think that it absolutely needs to be.
Mhm.
So, I'm curious what you mentioned communities. Are you working with several different communities?
Well, one is, the major city in we're a planning commission of
That's
20
what I was wondering. Okay, so
towns.
you're from the
So,
planning commission.
yeah. And so we have the capital city in our planning commission.
I
So,
see.
so a lot of their initiatives they take on themselves because they have staff. So, uh, however, um, most of the industry in our area has settled around the rail yard corridor and around the river that runs through Concord, even though we have three other towns that we're focusing on as well. But the rivers are a big focus because of the source of hydropower that used to run all the mills, just like in the other New England states. So, uh, but this adding this additional site to our application is a different twist
I see.
um,
Mm,
on the population, homeless population. It's gotten a lot of press lately.
Mm.
There's certainly a lot of attention on it, and we're trying to figure out a way to work it in to the application, just because it coincides with the area that we're studying or we're presenting for environmental cleanup as well.
And are there any currently any initial plans on redevelopment or thoughts about what that site could be?
So, um, yes, on a broad scale, but
Mhm.
nothing that, um, yeah, I don't know how to answer that yet. Probably. I need to think about that.
Which regional planning commission are you from,
We're
Joyce?
Central.
In Connecticut?
No, New Hampshire. So
Oh,
we,
New Hampshire.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Great. Well, it's great to have you here. And
Thanks for doing these seminars. I mean, I found them all really helpful. I've been with the Planning Commission 6 months, so it's been a lot.
yeah,
to
I'm sure
learn.
that's an adjustment. But thank you for being here. And I'm definitely interested in talking with you further about, you know, your houselessness or homelessness population that you have and including that. We've been having some conversations around housing with some organizations within Connecticut. So yeah, I'm interested in hearing more about what you're doing and if there's anything that we can do to support you in terms of community engagement.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe we could,
Yeah.
follow on
Yeah,
Yeah,
please
I,
that
reach out to
topic.
us.
I think I have your email from when you signed up, so I'll follow up with you after the webinar.
That'd be great. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Rupal, did you have anything else you wanted to
No,
add?
I think that's great. I do think that we do need to think about this more because of course we're seeing this as a larger issue. I think of course, you know, we're focused on New England, so we're definitely seeing these issues at least as a we're social workers, so we understand this homelessness and you know, the impact that it has on communities and thinking about sustainable solutions. And as far as redevelopment, I think we need to consider how, you know, and as far as the application for EPA, I think it's a broader conversation that we'd like to have with you, and we'd like to consult with some of our other team members. So please do reach out to us, and I think we're
Yeah.
going to have a broader conversation about this with our team as well. So hopefully we can think of some strategies between now and then and potentially work with you if that's of interest.
Yeah, same here. I would need to bring in our staff.
Great.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank
Yeah, well,
you.
thank you for being here, Joyce. And yeah, we appreciate the
Sure.
conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sure. Thank you.
Okay.
So we can definitely share this with you if it's of interest, and you know, anybody watching the webinar later on, feel free to reach out or visit our website, and this will be uploaded shortly. But this is our anti-displacement guide in brownfields. It essentially goes into the strategies we just talked about in a bit more detail, and it provides some guiding reflection questions to help you think about the strategies and how they may look in your community. And soon, it will also include some case studies that help you visualize really what the strategy might look like when implemented. Still working on those, but they will be done shortly. And yeah, we're working on our community engagement page for our website, so it will be up on our website shortly. And, you know, obviously feel free to reach out to myself, Rupal, or the UConn tab email address, and we're happy to send over this resource and any other resources that may
Thank
be of
you.
interest. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
It would be great to have a copy of your presentation if that's going to be posted on your website. That would be great.
Yeah, all the webinars are recorded, the slides are uploaded to our
Yep.
website, and all the recordings will be on YouTube very shortly after this. So
Thanks.
yes, you'll have access to whatever you need. And then to conclude for the day, this is an hypothetical example that I wrote for a pretend town, but I used some language from different grants that I've read and tried to come up with something that might be helpful. So I'll just read the example out loud. There are significant efforts underway to minimize displacement and protect quality of life for existing residents while also leveraging the benefits of economic growth. The target area's neighborhood association and municipal government, partnered with identified stakeholders from Section 2B, have been working towards the creation of a Community Benefits Agreement, CBA. The CBA will outline community needs, desired benefits of residents and local businesses, and how funding for this project will be used. Keeping residents and businesses in their neighborhoods is an integral part of the CBA and our town and city's overall vision. The CBA will be initiated with stakeholders prior to redevelopment and utilize community engagement tactics to ensure underserved groups are supported throughout the redevelopment process. So I know that everything on your MAC grants has to be concise and you have a lot of information to fill in. So, only really a few sentences can be used for this section. But I would also just keep in mind how many points the environmental justice section is worth. It's worth 10 points, whereas the other parts of section 2 are worth 5 points, I believe. So there's really a lot of emphasis on this part of the grant. And it's okay to not know what displacement might look like or how it might occur, but preparing, planning, and implementing strategies to measure and minimize displacement is really what the EPA is looking for. And just even identifying and naming displacement on the grant. I've read through so many grants where the word displacement isn't even on there. So just having it there will really put you ahead of the game, I think. And a little formula that you can follow to keep this section succinct and convey how important environmental justice is to your community is just to, like I said, name and identify displacement, and just kind of openly addressing the topic and showing that you have an understanding. List a specific strategy. You can use one of the strategies we just provided and write just a little bit about, how this anti-displacement strategy or whatever anti-displacement plan you come up with, you think suits your community. You can come up with a comprehensive anti-displacement plan and discuss that within your team, and then, have that, and then just write about it very briefly on the grant.
Mhm.
That'll give you a really good foundation to work with. And then,
That's helpful.
yeah, of course. And then through your writing, acknowledge the importance of protecting current residents and businesses and the importance of environmental justice. Like in this example, we say that the CBA is integral, and keeping residents and businesses in their neighborhoods is integral to our town's overall vision. Um,
And I would say, just to add to that, sorry, Kitty, if you know
of
something
course.
specific, like we worked with a community that had a growing young population, the tourism was, something that was growing in their community, but they also had an older adult community that they needed to consider as well. So if you know something specific about the demographics of your community and why, these potential populations are being, that is kind of the focus of some of the work that you're doing. I would mention that. I would be as specific as you can be, but as inclusive as you can be as well. And think about communities that haven't been historically involved. Many of the communities we work with, um, there's been, select few kind of neighborhoods that have been historically involved in some of this work. So when you're thinking about the community benefits agreement, what communities are being directly impacted and have not had a voice, or not had a place at the table, I think are, I know there's very little space, but, being as concise as possible, but also being as specific as possible at the
Sure.
same time, I think is important. Yeah, and I know Katie has a lot more experience reviewing some of these grants. So, just even, I do think that even though, previous applications have had less, have not talked about displacement, I think EPA is hoping that communities rise to the occasion. And seeing that there is, this is a new day and we need to address these things. So I do think that they are still looking for, they're looking for this, and I think there are communities that are going to, are very clear that this is that we need to do this. So I think, thinking that, hey, this is a necessity now is important. I think for this application. I don't
That
know, Katie, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Rupal. In a meeting on the guidelines, and how the guidelines changed from this year to last year, there's just a really, really big emphasis on environmental justice, underserved groups. And so, you know, I think, and I'd be happy to work with this on you and or work on this with you and talk about it more with you. But talking about your homeless populations and any other underserved groups, that will really convey how much your communities within your regional commission need this grant,
Yeah.
and how it can be used to support those groups. You know, those are the kinds of communities that the EPA wants to give money to and wants to help and support.
Exactly.
And I have a question following on that. Early on in the presentation, you said that the most grants would be awarded to the community-wide assessment pool, that there were 60. Do you have any idea of how many applications there are for those 60 awards? Or in the past?
I will, when I follow up with you, I don't know it off the top of my head. I've definitely heard it somewhere before, but when I follow up with you, I will let you know. I do know that, you know, we encourage communities to apply for the assessment or the cleanup grants because, you know, we have communities that want to apply for the multi-purpose grants, and those are incredibly selective and much harder to come by.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
okay,
you know, we see, I think, you know, if we were to like review your grant or help you at all in that process, I believe we have an 80% plus success rate for the communities that we work with and helping them apply for the grants.
We've heard that, and we have already reached out to Marissa. She's reviewed a draft from last year for a grant we weren't successful for, and we're in the process of editing that now. Rewriting that. So we're kind of worked in. I think that there's a deadline today that for first draft, but we don't quite have that ready. But I guess you'd call it a pre-draft. She reviewed. It was very helpful.
Oh, good. Okay. And if you can't make that deadline, you know, just send it over when you're ready and somebody will look at it for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all the assistance. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
And for the webinar, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay,
Great.
thank you, Joyce.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Here's a feedback link if you know have any feedback you want to give on the webinar. But you know, other than that, there's our contact information, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Rupa. Thank you, Katie.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good day. Bye.